Breaking news, the Justice Department says next week members of Congress could view unredacted Epstein files after Democrats accuse DOJ of unlawfully releasing personal survivor information while concealing identities of possible Epstein enablers who sent several emails like this one, making vile references to an encounter with his, quote, littlest girl. The newly released draft Epstein indictment in Florida from 20 years ago shows DOJ aware of at least 16 schoolgirls who'd been victimized. And even in that document, DOJ protected names of Epstein's 3 alleged co-conspirators. A DOJ official said in a statement that any fully redacted names are of women. Survivors are demanding answers.
Why were the redactions handled in the way that they were handled? What was the process that they used? Who vetted these redactions? I think that we want to understand why they don't feel like there's any evidence here to bring charges against co-conspirators, why the federal indictment that was prepared in Florida that we have just seen released was never followed through on.
Joining me now, Ty Cobb, former White House counsel in the first Trump administration. Welcome back to the show, Ty. So many open questions, but how could DOJ release personal victim information when the Epstein Transparency Act requires victims to be protected and stipulates no redactions to protect powerful people from embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity?
That's an excellent question, Alex. Nice to be with you. I think that DOJ has shown clearly that they don't feel bound by that statute. They blatantly ignored the deadline, blew through it. What they produced, as you said, protected perpetrators, but betrayed victims. I think this is part and parcel for the way they've gone about this since the time that they first promised to release it all, then said there was no there, and then denied that there were many documents. Then insisted that, Pam Bondi personally and others had been through them all, which clearly didn't happen. And now we've got millions and millions of documents and a document dump that fortunately people out there are sorting and finding out the significant things, such as, Howard Lutnick's multiple interactions with his next door neighbor, despite his insistence that he hadn't had any contact with him after 2005, but yet had a decade-long relationship thereafter, including a substantial business relationship. They're just lying, and they don't intend to get the actual important information out that might compromise people beyond Lutnick.
Well, you have Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who was also President Trump's personal lawyer, who signed a memo on the review process saying the first level involved 500 DOJ employees. The second level involved 40 specialized attorneys. Does, Ty, this suggest protection of potential co-conspirators was deliberate? And who would have given that order, bearing in mind the president has repeatedly said he did not want to see what he called innocent people hurt by this case?
Yeah, he doesn't mean that. And the people that ordered this are Bondi, Patel, and Blanche.
Okay, let's turn to Trump's push to nationalize elections and the ripple effect on state and local elections agencies. So here is what the president told NBC's Tom Llamas.
There are some areas in our country that are extremely corrupt. They have very corrupt elections. Take a look at Detroit. Take a look at Philadelphia. Take a look at Atlanta.
Will you trust the results of the midterms if Republicans lose control of Congress?
I will, if the elections are honest.
So will this trigger new lawsuits? I mean, can you imagine being White House counsel now? What advice would you imagine Trump is getting from the current White House counsel?
It doesn't appear that whatever advice he's getting is either accurate or effective. And I'm not sure he actually consults them. I think this is a political enterprise led largely by Miller and Vought. And as we know, Trump has called for the nationalization of elections. Steve Bannon has said they're going to flood polling places with ICE agents. When Trump says he'll trust the returns if they're legal, what he means is he'll trust them as long as his people are winning. And to the extent they're not winning, we'll see ballot seizures, we'll see poll intimidation, I think, as somebody who previously attempted to prevent, at the possible cost of the assassination of the Vice President of the United States, prevent the peaceful transfer of power, he has no intent of losing the House this year, which would cost him dearly in terms of his ability to wield power in the tyrannical sense that he does.
You know, the White House offered several versions of explanations for why Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard was involved in that FBI raid at the elections office in Georgia. Here's a sample of that. Take a listen.
She took a lot of heat 2 days ago because she went in at Pam's insistence. She went in and she looked at votes that want to be checked out from Georgia. They say, why is she doing it? Right, Pam?
Why is Tulsi Gabbard there?
I don't know, but, a lot of the cheating comes from it's international cheating.
Tulsi Gabbard has been tapped by the President of the United States to oversee the sanctity and the security of our American elections.
I don't know why the director was there. She is not part of the grand jury investigation, but she is for sure a key part of our efforts at election integrity.
So I was going to ask you a question about this that I think you answered, but here's how I'm going to put it. If this is about election integrity, is this a legal role for Gabbard?
No. I mean, by law, and practice, her role is limited to international interference that could reach elections, but there's no evidence that there was any. Keep in mind, Bill Barr, Lindsey Graham, a host of people, tried to explain to Trump in 2020 that he had actually lost. There's no question, as Jack Smith's, substantial evidence that he went through in his testimony, even though it wasn't the full volume of evidence that he actually had or was allowed to share, clearly establishes that Trump knew he lost. He's been told there was no fraud. There's no evidence of fraud, certainly in Atlanta, limited evidence of fraud in Detroit, nothing that would alter more than a few votes. This is him sensitizing America for what he intends to do in November, which is to interfere in the elections, seize ballots, and intimidate people at the polls under the guise of protection. Now, when you pointed out that Trump said Pam told him, Blanche, Pam's deputy, said he had no idea why she was there. The reality is it's just like the story about the Obama meme, the racist, reprehensible meme that he posted yesterday. Anybody that believes that Trump didn't know that was going up is dreaming. Trump didn't order Pam to tell Tulsi. Tulsi said that she was there at his request. They've got so many stories on this that all the prevarication indicates is that she wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to be caught hiding behind a doorway wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, which is the only way that people now know that she was there.
I'm going to have you on at least every month between now and November because you give these prognostications on what to expect. Your last one was kind of a doomsday scenario, and this one isn't much better, my friend. But nonetheless, I do want to keep you coming back and see if things have changed in your mind. So I will see you again then, if not before.
My pleasure to be with you, and the stakes are too high not to call this stuff out.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Ty Cobb.